this new world, getting through COVID, lockdowns, job and location changes, adjusting to working from home, the stresses of executive corporate world, or running your own business has created the boardroom headache. After hours has become during hours and the high tolerance executive. Today, we're going to discuss the COVID hangover. And it is with absolute pleasure I'm going to invite my guest, who's going to introduce herself, and we're going to ask her all sorts of amazing questions. Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Lizzie Wagner from the Lizzie Wagner Group, and let's welcome Michaela.
Hello, Lizzie. Lovely to meet you. So my name is Michaela Weaver, and for 20 years I worked in the executive world in a host of different capacities. So I started out, I got a biochemical science degree, and I started out in blue chip chemical industry. And then I moved on to work in the city of London, in and around the area of the southeast of England. I worked for the Cabinet Office in London. I worked for regional government. I worked with the Ministry of Defence at various locations around Europe. I worked in pretty much every kind of capacity of the corporate world, very much in the boardroom, often bringing many different boardroom chief executives together. I think at one point I had a room of 20 chief execs, all developing a single coordinated strategy for a particular area. So very much high level, high stress, and multivariate.
And what was it that made you decide to go into your own business?
Yeah, so having seen a lot of different environments from an employee perspective, I decided to start my own management consultancy business. So I was a management consultant and executive coach for many years. I say now, unfortunately, I was that woman in the boardroom nursing a very, very strong cup of coffee and a very large hangover. So whilst all of that was going on and outwardly incredibly successful, at the same time, there was this growing dark secret that I nursed very closely to my heart and in my soul, that was a growing problem around alcohol.
And that's what sparked you to go into your own business. So what is your business?
Okay, so from the executive world, at one point in and around this problem I was just telling you about, the growing concern around alcohol, various things happened around that. And to cut a very long story short, and I'm sure we'll get into the detail, at some point in the middle of it all, Lizzie, I realized I had to stop drinking. That terrified me, but I did it. So we'll talk about that, no doubt, in a minute. So I stopped drinking alcohol. I removed it from my life. And at that point, everything improved. And again, we'll talk about that. And it was such a phenomenal change in my own life. And it was also triggered and catalyzed by the fact that my father was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And he was a smoker all his life. All of these things came together, and I decided that stopping drinking had been such a phenomenal change in my life that I wanted to switch over my contribution to in the executive world to actually open the conversation up and to help others who might have been stuck where I was to go through some realizations about how all this works and to make the changes, if they wanted to, that I did as well. And so the Alcohol Coach was born.
I'm sure there are so many people that can relate to your story. Being an executive coach myself and traveling around the world, I see so many high-end achievers and high performers with that little dark secret. But the other thing is that it used to be reserved till after work, till 5 or 6 o'clock. But now, with people working from home, with Zoom calls, a lot of those cups of coffee, I'm sure, are not coffee. So that's increased the effect of alcohol and the usage. Can you explain a little bit about that?
So I speak to executives all the time for whom this has now become a problem. During COVID, alcohol sales, varying places around the world, increased by 30 to 60%. So phenomenal increase in alcohol consumption. brought on by some uncertainty and, as you rightly point out, changing working environments. What happens is that with any, and I'm going to say addictive drug because that is what alcohol is, and we can explain that more if you like. So with any addictive drug, when we have barriers around it, which is what the working hours and going out to work did, there was a very clear barrier where we don't do it there. We don't do it because we're going out to the office. And when those barriers are removed, what happens is there is no excuse not to drink alcohol at any time. And so those barriers just dissolve, and it's like literally opening the floodgates. It starts creeping in, the hours start narrowing when alcohol might not be consumed, and particularly we model other people's behavior. And there was such a astounding change in the way people were partying, having meetings, or we'll just go and get a glass of wine. It became normalized, acceptable in inverted commas, and for all of those reasons, people started to drink in the day. And when that pattern, it's not a habit, it's an addictive pattern, when that starts to entrench, it's actually very difficult without the right tools and techniques to remove it. Yeah.
And a lot of people talk about how well they can handle alcohol. What is it that makes some people be able to handle it and some not? What's the dynamic behind that?
So the first thing you need to really understand about alcohol is that alcohol hijacks our natural biology. You know, we are animals, we are human biological beings, and alcohol is a drug, and it hijacks it. So that's the first thing to kind of begin to throw out there. And so there are many things around. If we talk about handling in terms of tolerance, where some people can seem to drink more and be unaffected, and then others will drink less. So if we talk about that just for a moment, there's a number of factors going on. First of all, our body doesn't want toxins in it, and alcohol is a highly toxic poison. It causes 7 different types of cancer. It causes Alzheimer's. It's not just about the liver, which is what we tend to think, don't we? And so it being a toxic poison, the body becomes more efficient at processing it. It doesn't want it in there. And in order to stop it killing us, literally, half a pint of neat alcohol will kill a human being. It needs to get more efficient at processing it in the liver. Now, actually, that's not a good thing, because all of the damage to other areas of our body and the liver is still being done. It's just that we're more effective at getting rid of it, which then means that more of it has to be consumed for the same, in inverted commas, effect. So that's the first thing to understand. The second thing, which is, I think, will fascinate anybody listening to this, is that the basic way that alcohol works is it hijacks our motivation and learning cycle in our brain. Now, as humans, right back to the beginning of time, we're motivated to go out and get what we need. If we weren't able to do that, we would have become extinct a long, long time ago. And so if you take that as going out and foraging for berries, once we'd gone out and foraged those berries initially, we needed to be motivated not only to go out to that same place for those same berries again, we needed to be motivated to go out and get more. Because if we'd only gone to that one place for those 1 berries, it wouldn't have been enough to sustain us. And so what happens is the next time we get a rush of dopamine released into our system, and that is that feeling of, oh, I want it, I've got to get it, I'm going to have it. As highly driven individuals and high achievers, that motivation is a high component of many of our lives. We're highly driven individuals. So that makes this conundrum even more interesting. So we're driven to get those berries, and then we're driven further because biologically, we will not get that same hit of dopamine by going back to the same place we went to. We have to go further. Now, if we take that into the alcohol conundrum, what that means is we don't actually have to go out and forage. All we have to do is go into the kitchen, open the fridge, and take out the bottle of bubbly or whatever it might be. And so we can't be driven to go further. We can't be driven to work harder. So we're just driven to consume more. And we have to consume more, constantly chasing the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It never exists. And so the drinker is always chasing the feeling they had in the beginning. And they always have to, over time, have more and more of the drug in order to have less and less of a feeling. That is the way it works. It cannot work any other way. And so when we hear about people handling drink, they're motivated to need to want more, and the effects of it feel less, and the body is better at processing the poison. But all the time, the addiction, because that's what it is growing, and the damage to the organism, which happens to be our lovely bodies, is more significant.
I know a lot of our viewers will be quite shocked at the topic of choice today, but I think it's so important because we talk about stress and anxiety and meditation tools, but what is the connection between anxiety and stress and overwhelm and the use of alcohol?
Yeah, so one of the reasons that, alcohol consumption has gone up during the pandemic and working in from home is that we are dealing with a lot of uncertainty. We have dealt with a lot of uncertainty and overwhelm and stress. So all of those things have had a factor. And there is the belief. In fact, I've now surveyed 15,000 women, and every single one, bar one or two, there's always the exception, has told me that at some point in time, on some level, and often, very often, they drink because alcohol, they believe, is alleviating feelings of stress and anxiety and overwhelm. So there's a perceived benefit there. And so let's just talk about that for a moment, because in fact, it's actually the opposite. Alcohol causes stress, anxiety, and therefore overwhelm. And there are a number of reasons for that. So if you imagine that you've had a really tight and uncomfortable pair of shoes on all day, as you're going through the day, those shoes are becoming more and more uncomfortable. They're hurting, they're uncomfortable, and all you want to do when you get home from work is to just, or you finished your working day, if you're working from home, all you want to do is just take them off. And at that point, you would feel relief, an enormous sigh of relief. Having a drink of alcohol at the end of the day is equivalent to that sigh of relief. And when people actually think about that, that is actually what's happening. The glass is in hand, and often before it even touches the lips, it is like taking off a tight pair of shoes. Now, what alcohol then does is, consuming that drink of alcohol, actually what you're doing is you're taking the shoes off and you're simultaneously committing yourself to putting them back on again the next day. Because alcohol is a depressant. And what I mean by that is it slows the system down. I don't mean it causes us depression, although that is a side effect very often as well. Mm-hmm. So alcohol slows down our system. And in response to that, because our bodies want balance and equilibrium, they want what's called homeostasis, our bodies will then speed up in response to that. And that happens approximately 5 hours after consuming the last drink of alcohol. So for anybody who's had that experience of waking up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning after consuming a drink or two or a bottle or whatever, however much, that is your body responding to the slowing down by speeding it up again. A palpitating heart, adrenaline, cortisol are released into our system. And adrenaline and cortisol are hormones that are related to our fight and flight response, which is stress and anxiety. So there's actually a physical reason why we feel stressed and anxious when we wake up in the morning after consuming alcohol. And so that's there all day. It causes irritation, that kind of uncomfortable feeling. And then to get rid of that feeling in the evening, we consume alcohol again, and the whole cycle kicks off. Another analogy that's really helpful is to think of a car alarm. And that car alarm will be going off all day, getting louder and louder and louder. And at the end of the day, we just want that car alarm to stop. We just want the peace of the quiet. But what we're doing by turning that car alarm off is we're committing to it going back on again in 5 hours time, and for that level of sound to be building up and up all day. So there are other reasons why alcohol causes stress and anxiety, because we beat ourselves up, we feel shame, we feel guilt, the inner critic is raging because we just don't understand, as strong and capable people, why we can't control our consumption of alcohol, because hey, we can control everything else in our lives, right? We commit to work hard and we get our results in business. But when it comes to alcohol, that same method just doesn't work, and that causes us stress as well.
Why are some people alcoholics and some people just can have a drink? How does that work? What's the difference there?
Okay, so the term alcoholic, Lizzie, is one I just don't use. I don't find it helpful, and I recognize that everybody out there in the world does use it, and it really doesn't help, because when we think of alcoholic, we think of tramp on park bench drinking out of a paper bag. That's the kind of vision we have. And so a few things around that. So if we think about a smoker, and it's a really good analogy, we think about somebody who smokes, we do not ever use the term smokeaholic. We don't think of a lifelong illness. There are people who smoke and people who don't. And we would say that a smoker is addicted to nicotine. And so it's exactly the same with alcohol. Alcohol is a highly addictive drug. It works in exactly the same way as nicotine. It's more addictive than nicotine. And so because it's a highly addictive drug, you take enough of it, you're going to get addicted. And the term alcoholic is really unhelpful, because for people like me who were, I can say, just addicted, who were addicted to alcohol, I used to look at that person right at the end of the spectrum and think, well, I'm okay because I'm not that. And yet all of the other things were there. And so it is a complete spectrum. Everybody who consumes alcohol, and you may find this shocking, everybody who smokes cigarettes on a certain level is addicted to nicotine. Everybody who consumes alcohol on a certain level is addicted to alcohol. Now, the main difference between when somebody really recognizes it's a problem is that alcohol becomes linked to our emotions. And many of your listeners and viewers will recognize this. We start off drinking because it's fun, or we're told it's fun. We see our peers, we see our adults in society, we hear it all over the media that it's fun. We see actors and actors consuming alcohol, and it's all about the fun, isn't it? At the top of the Maslow's hierarchy. And over time, what happens is that what was once fun, we start doing for all emotions. We drink because we're bored, we drink because we're angry, we drink because we're frustrated, we drink because we're stressed, everything. And when that emotional link is made to alcohol, that's when the addiction really takes hold, because we use alcohol, even if that word isn't one that people recognize, because I never thought I actually used alcohol or that I was a drug taker. I really would have been horrified to think that. I now know, unfortunately, that was the case. So when that emotional linkage is really embedded, that's when the addiction takes hold, as we might recognize it. And when there is no emotional connection, that's when we hear that the person who may have a drink now and again, maybe once every couple of weeks, who says, well, I can literally take it or leave it. So if you've got any more questions around that, please do ask. Well, I'm passionate about the term alcoholic.
I think a lot of my viewers might ask, if alcohol is a drug addiction, the sorts of strategies that are in place to support this alcohol addiction would be the same for other drugs or not?
You mean strategies that might be available out there for them sort of nationally to access? Yes. There is so much misinformation out there that it annoys me, and it's staggering. So in my own journey, I did call the AA Alcoholics Anonymous. I did go there, and it helps millions of people. And it is there as a resource. So I'm not, anything that helps anybody, that's a good thing. I can only talk from my own experience. And so when I did ring the AA, I spoke to a lovely guy called John, and I ended up coaching him. He was telling me how he manages one day at a time, how it had been 16 years, 284 days, and he could almost quote the hours since he last had a drink. I can sit here now, Lizzie, and say I last had a drink about 6 years ago. I have no idea what the date is. I don't count days because I'm out of the prison and I am free. And so I did not want to go to meetings. I don't think I could have bear to do that, to be honest with you. That's just me. I didn't want to go and sit in meetings. I didn't want to be in a lifelong recovery loop. And so that is available. It wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to empower myself, not disempower myself. I didn't want to sit and sort of say I am an alcoholic, because actually I now know that wasn't the case. There's no such thing. And so that is there. I went to my local physician, I went to a doctor, and there is very poor understanding there, particularly in the UK. I don't know, can't talk for other countries. I was told to cut down. That is the first thing that everybody says, well, just cut down. And so, well, to be honest, if I could do that, I would have done it. I tried it. I tried to moderate, as everybody would have done who has even a minor problem. We try to do dry challenges and we end up coming back drinking more. We might tell ourselves that we won't drink on, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then we might do that for a week, and then oops, it's Tuesday, I'm feeling stressed, excuse me, and I'll have a drink. So we do all these things to try to moderate. We've already done that, and so that doesn't help. And then we're asked, there's a checklist that they often go through. Do you drink in the morning? Well, no. Therefore, it's okay. It clearly wasn't. I also went to a counsellor, and that was all about rooting around and digging into my past, looking for some enormous traumatic reason. And that sometimes is a trigger. Certainly not always. People get addicted to addictive substances. There's no shame in it. It's just what happens. So that is what is available. That was what was available to me. None of it suited. And the level of understanding from a science point of view is very, very poor.
So before speaking to you, I had done quite a bit of research, of course, and a lot of the medical fraternity would say you have to reduce slowly the amount of alcohol because you could have a fit or some terrible thing can happen. So what would you recommend if that's the case? Are you supposed to then substitute that with some other calmative, or what's the process there?
Okay, so I'm not a medical doctor, I have to say that. And so anything I say around this, I would advise anybody to go and check out with a medical doctor. I have to say that and make that sort of disclaimer, if you like. And it's again, it's a spectrum. And so I went from drinking, this is my personal story, I went from drinking between a bottle and sometimes 3 at the weekend of wine a night to nothing without any significant withdrawal effect at all. Alcohol is 95% psychological. The addiction is in our subconscious or unconscious mind, far, far more than it is our bodies. However, there are those that are chemically and physically addicted, and there has to be a tapering process.
Yes, which is what they normally do in the clinics, right?
Yeah. So again, it's not black and white. It is an area of grey. So for an average drinker who is functioning in the day, going about their business, working, it's unlikely that there will be any significant medical effect, because effectively they're detoxing all day. It's withdrawing from the alcohol, withdraws from the system the minute its supply is cut off. So if somebody stops drinking at 11 o'clock at night and then starts drinking again at 3 in the afternoon, alcohol has been withdrawing. That's why they may feel shaky. That's why their heart starts racing. It's withdrawing that whole time. And we get very frightened about the perceived physical withdrawal because we think it's a physical addiction, whereas actually 95% is psychological. It's a psychoactive drug and it's a psychological addiction.
And what do you think is the reason that people don't address the problem?
Many. So first of all, it's normalized. Everybody knows that, or everybody perceives that alcohol is okay to take, and that it's cool to have a hangover. It's bigged up, it's bravadoed, it's who, and what, what is it, what am I all about? Yeah, I can take my alcohol. Well, fast forward 20 years and it's likely to cause a physical problem, if not mental. I mean, that is the reality. However, it is the social drug. And I'll take you back again, Lizzie, back to the 50s when 90% of men, that's the only statistic, men smoked. It was considered to be uncool not to smoke. Mm-hmm. My father told this wonderful story, and he had lung cancer, wonderful story of going for an interview where he was literally bombarded with smoking. That was the reality. Back then, doctors used to advertise Camel cigarettes. Go and Google it. It's actually advertising posters with doctors saying, smoking calms you. Well, anybody would now be horrified to know that. So that is where alcohol is now. It is changing because people like me are telling the truth about it. But the reality is that society makes out that it's an okay thing to do. So what that means is it takes quite a while for the awareness to click in that actually there is something wrong here. Added on to that, the fact that where people are really, really happy to share their, hey, I've done this, I've done that, and, isn't it all great stories, what they don't share is what goes on after hours back at home when the psychoactive drug has started to affect them, their brains shut down, they start saying things that they don't remember, they start saying things that they then regret the next day, and it causes all kinds of problems in the home. Those stories are the ones that we keep silent. I know this is the truth because I was that person. I caused havoc at home, and then I'd step out into the boardroom and nobody would ever know. It was my secret. And there are many, many out there. And if anybody's listening to this, there's no shame and there's no blame. It is just what happens. So there's all of that side of it. And then there is the fear, because we fear success. How can I possibly have a happy, wonderful life without alcohol? Because that is what happens when we become addicted. We become attached to it. It's like our best buddy. We don't think we can live without it. And then there's the fear of failure, because everybody would have, who is at that point, even if they're still in that decade that it took me of actually realizing it was a problem. Hope this will actually fast forward it for some people. They fear failure because we employ the same strategies that we employ in the rest of our lives to control this thing. We just think we need to be determined. We think when we wake up in the morning, we go, right, we're not going to do it today. We just think we need that resolve. We think we need just commitment. We think we need a strong will. And when we do that, and it's 6 o'clock in the evening and we cave, we start losing our self-efficacy around this. Our confidence is starting to wobble. And after a few attempts, we really think we can't do it. And then that fills us with the fear of failure. So the first thing I do when I work with anybody is we start to build their self-efficacy and their confidence, and their belief that, yeah, sure, we can do it. It's easy. And also then removing the fear of failure. Because if I can just explain this very, very briefly, there's a whole host of learning that needs to happen between now and that future that will change the way that people think about it. When we first jump in a car and we can't drive, well, that's because we don't know how to. By the time we passed our driving test, we've learned a whole host of skills and we've learned a whole new bunch of stuff. And that is exactly the same around alcohol. We fear success because we just don't know a load of things yet. Nobody turns up to the bar as a barrister and just starts doing their job from day one. They have to go through the process of learning, realization, understanding, practice. All of these kinds of things has to happen. And so at day one, we fear success, we fear failure, and we're largely influenced by the normalization in society. So strip all that away, and most people would actually want to change now.
How do we get people to recognize they have a problem in the first place?
People listening to me are likely to recognize and resonate. Anybody who's woken up with that feeling of guilt and shame, who's said to themselves, today is the day, who's then got to the end of the day and realized that it's not quite that simple. They've woken up the next day, feeling the same way, saying the same things, and going round that loop. They'll know that they don't want to be feeling that way anymore.
Yeah.
And so what I want to say clearly to those people is, A, it is not your fault. That is the first thing. And for many, just to hear that is such an enormous relief. You're not weak-willed. There's nothing wrong with you. In fact, the stronger willed, the more difficult using willpower actually is, because you're fighting a conscious mind against an enormous, if you think of an iceberg, the unconscious mind is the under the water part of the iceberg, and the conscious decision is the top of the iceberg. Alcohol problems are unconscious. If I was to say to anybody listening who may be in that situation, this is a huge thing, right? You're going to decide to have an alcohol problem. Surely, like when you got married or when you had a child or whenever, you're going to know exactly what day it was that you made this phenomenally important decision, right? When did you decide this was going to happen? They, well, I didn't decide it. Of course not. It's unconscious. Because of all the belief systems that have been embedded, because of social conditioning, because of the dopamine learning stuff, it's just hooked in. It is nobody's fault. And we were encouraged to take this drug. And particularly people of my generation who kind of grew up, and my clients, anybody who grew up in the 70s, 80s, and corporate 90s, we were encouraged to do this. So that's what I would say. Just throw off everything you've ever heard, everything you've ever understood, and just think, well, maybe it actually is easier than I think. And maybe if it's not my fault, maybe if I didn't actually cause this deliberately, maybe if there's a different process and method, which isn't willpower, which is what everybody tries to use, which doesn't work, with the right set of tools, with the right process, it is easy to break out of the alcohol trap.
With this amazing opportunity, what sort of people do you work with, and what is life like on the other side of no alcohol?
So I specialize in working with executives or people at an executive level. And I think the main reason for that, Lizzie, excuse me, is that was me. That person was me. And so therefore I can empathize. And I think the shame is so much more because we are so successful, and it can be in any walk of life, whether it is a celebrity or whether it is a diplomat or whether it is a chief executive. Those things don't particularly matter. It's that level of authenticity that we really want in our lives. And alcohol, quite frankly, annihilates that because it conflicts with our values. So I work with high level individuals. I specialize in working with women. And I will also take on any male clients who want to work with me as well. I won't turn anybody away if they're committed to the change and what I'm saying resonates. So that's very clear. The changes that I've seen in people are, and I want to say unbelievable, but that doesn't do it a credit. because sometimes it has to be seen to be believed. If you think of every aspect of life, that is where alcohol begins to affect every aspect of life in a negative way. So you take that out, it's like taking a poison arrow out of an individual. Everything starts to improve. So I see in my clients, I see joy. I can see it in their faces. When we get together, I do a lot of Zoom coaching. I can, before they've even spoken, I know when that change has happened, because their faces are brighter, their shoulders are lighter, their eyes are shining. I see a weight has been taken off their shoulders. And that is phenomenal. And they're just saying, I just feel great. And where a future really starts to open up for them. So if you think of a pebble in a pond, the ripples are everywhere. Only it's more than that, because it's not just singularly two-dimensional, it's three-dimensional. It's like a spherical pond, if you like. It goes absolutely everywhere. So the first thing that people report is that their relationships are transformed. What happens is that for people who are drinking every night, even if a bottle of wine a night changes your personality, your brain starts to shut down. You start to just say different things, and the people around you will know that, and they start to kind of ignore what you say. And so take that away. I have clients who are really saying, my family is really, really listening to me in a way that I didn't actually quite notice they weren't. I was just getting frustrated. I was just wanting to be heard. And now I am. My grown-up children are re-engaging. I've had clients, high-level clients with grown-up children with grandchildren, who have come to me desperate that their grown-up children wouldn't let their grandchildren come to stay with them, because they knew that they'd be drinking of an evening. And now these grandchildren are coming for sleepovers. The children are coming back to stay. One woman went away on holiday in Europe with 4 of her grown-up children for the first time ever. She was in tears. She just said it was phenomenal. They're all coming round to it. They're just all re-engaging because they love her. They didn't trust her. So those relationships, we've got women who are re-engaging with their husbands. They are, rather than just kind of moaning about stuff, and after a couple of drinks, they're now communicating. They are really, really engaging. And their husbands are saying, I didn't know that wasn't what you wanted. I didn't know what you wanted. I didn't know what you needed. Alcohol was just serving the lack of need that grew over those years. So relationships, phenomenal improvements. People are more effective at work. They're getting re-energized and motivated in new ways at work, because where they were just kind of getting through on caffeine to get them through the day, they're now waking up vibrant. They're finding new ways of working, expressing themselves at work, contributing at work. People are getting involved more in charities. They just want to give back. They're feeling more empowered. The inner critic has gone. And if you imagine the knock-on effect of that, it is just enormous. Where that inner critic was, well, why can't you do this? What's the matter with you? What's wrong with you? When that is quietened and just calm, all of a sudden the power starts coming back. We are really, really powerful. And I'm seeing clients completely empowered. Then we've got the optimism that comes and brings new hobbies, new interests, whatever that might be. I mean, for me, the year I stopped drinking alcohol, the money I saved in the first year, which would have been around 5,000 or 6,000 UK pounds. So that's around 9,000 Australian dollars, something around that, 8 or 9. I bought myself a motorbike. I got a motorbike license. I now drive a 1,000cc motorcycle. I'm an advanced rider, and I love it. That opened up my world just in that area. I couldn't risk getting on a motorbike with a hangover, but now there's no risk of ever having one. That's opened up for me. I've got women who are buying horses, riding, just doing things, all kinds of hobbies, calm hobbies, going on painting retreats, you name it, people are doing it. And so work, relationships, health, sleep is an enormous area that people struggle with because, and we may not have time to go into it now, but alcohol really disrupts sleep. People think alcohol helps because it's like hitting yourself over the head with a brick every night. It knocks you unconscious, but it's really, really bad sleep. And bad sleep is bad for mental health, which has a knock-on effect to stress and overwhelm and everything else. So sleep is beautiful, it's calm, it's replenishing, it's the kind of sleep that our bodies actually need. So one of the first things actually that comes back is, oh my goodness, it takes maybe a week or two after cutting off alcohol supply. But after that initial period, it's like, oh my goodness, I have never slept this well in my whole life, not in living memory. And so people are sleeping so much better. It's just phenomenal. And that is therefore every single aspect of life. If I've missed any out, let me know, and I'm sure I can give you some case studies of other areas. So it's literally sleep. People are coming back saying they've never felt so calm. They've had lifelong anxiety that has gone, and that is just phenomenal. Health issues disappearing, dissipating. I've been on medication for depression and anxiety, and I'm not on it anymore. So it is literally every single area that this is improving. So when people fear that success, what is it going to be like when you literally don't want something anymore? You literally don't want it. I use the analogy, well, imagine that, and sorry for women and sorry for men, it's just a good, an analogy. Imagine that you find out that your best friend has been having an affair with your husband for the last 20 years, or the other way around if you're a guy listening to it. Would you still look at that best friend in the same way? Or would you want them out of your life, never to look at them again? And people go, well, I want them out of my life. Okay, so maybe it would take a little bit of adjustment because that friend's gone, but you absolutely are adamant. And then you just wouldn't give it a second's thought. You would feel empowered, you'd feel strong, you would be a bit annoyed, and you would just want to get on with the rest of your life. And that is what it's like. And then when that's gone, analogy ended, we've got all these benefits because you've taken out a highly toxic, psychoactive drug from your life. Who would want to take any of it when it really boiled down to that?
Michaela, this whole conversation is so inspiring, because you were such a successful corporate woman and now have a very successful coaching business. I think that's inspirational to most women that you can make that change, but mostly because you've made the change of the alcohol story. So again, it's probably quite confrontational to many of our viewers because it's not something that's talked about. But I'm sure, and I know of many colleagues and clients who've been in this difficult situation. So what we might do is drop a link down below so that they can get in touch with you and you could explain the different types of programs and packages that are available. It's been an absolute honor. You are the most calm, serene, beautiful person. I could listen to you for hours and hours. Just listening to you alone is calming. It's like a meditation CD. So thank you very, very much for your time today. As I said, we'll drop a link below. Lovely audience. This is Michaela Weaver from the Alcohol Coach, and she's in London. Is that correct? We're in Britain.
I'm in the UK.
Yeah. UK, but you can coach and have clients globally. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I have clients in all over Australia, New Zealand, America, Canada, etc., and the UK, of course.
Well, thank you so very much for your time, and we look forward to speaking with you again sometime very soon.
Thank you, Lizzie. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure. Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Lizzie Wagner. Thank you for being a fabulous audience today. Please don't forget to look down in the drop box to contact the fabulous Michaela Weaver.